This is a story about us and our data. This is also a story about big tech and our data. In a world of heightened digital connectivity, massive tech corporations are ever in search of new ways to shape humanity. Cyberspace is no longer just a digital underground for crackers, hackers, and the like. It is a space built for and fueled by human consciousness. We are the citizen users in big tech's net states, willingly entrusting our rhythms to their algorithms. But are we aware of the price we pay to play? So who are the leading big tech companies? While there are more equally formidable corporations, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, and Meta embody the pinnacle of modern-day tech dominance. Scott Galloway, in his book The Four, describes Amazon as Earth's biggest store, with a network that doubles several of its retail competitors combined. Apple, he writes, found great success filling two instinctual needs: to feel closer to God and to be attractive to the opposite sex. In the process, Apple claimed a place among the world's most profitable companies. Facebook amassed a following of 1.2 billion people and monopolized 1 of every 6 minutes spent online. And Alphabet is the modern man's God, our source of knowledge, harnessing the power of 2 billion people 24 hours a day and yielding a whole infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. In real life, big tech is responsible for thousands of jobs, putting food on the table for thousands of families. Beyond the jobs they provide, their products and services have become the cornerstone of entertainment, commerce, and productivity. The email services we use, the search engines we rely on, the social media platforms we engage, the streams we consume are all yields from big tech corps. One way or the other, we're all plugged into big tech, and big tech plugged into us. And so, it would be against the spirit of innovation not to point out that big tech accomplished and continues to accomplish great things. Over the years, big tech ushered in a slew of mass magical tech moments, introducing new products and services that continue to shape how we function as professionals and as social beings. Even the current impetus that underlies the mission and vision of development in nation-states like Belize is tech-driven, and one would argue exists by and large because of big tech's innovation in more developed nation-states. All this I point out to assure you that this is not a treatise about leaving cyberspace. Even if we don't love it, it's probably too late to leave it. And so what this is a sober look at the relationship we as citizen users share with net states. Is that price of admission we pay to connect, to produce, to socialize, to shop, to learn, to consume, fair? Or are we once again pitted against a force who designed the interplay between our rhythms and their algorithms in a way that always affords them the upper hand? Before we explore the cost of admission, let's explore why big tech is now being referred to as net states. The term net state was coined in 2017 by public servant, teacher, and writer Alexis Wachowski. In her book, The Information Trade, she outlines 4 qualities shared among modern-day net states. 1. Net states have international reach. 2. Their core work is based on technology. 3. Their pursuits are influenced by beliefs, not just the bottom line. And 4. They expand into areas formerly the domain of governments, areas outside their primary products and services. Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Alphabet all tick those boxes. In fact, the first 2 criteria for Wachowski's net state status is clearly exemplified in the wealth accrued from the global magnitude of their reach and mastery over their core technological work. Collectively, these big tech corps were worth $2.3 trillion in 2017. But those figures are pre-COVID. According to Forbes, more recent 2022 figures indicate that the Four Horsemen's collective worth almost tripled to $6.4 trillion. Now what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that big tech companies, at least from an economic perspective, have market capitalizations that rival the GDP of many nation states, and not just small ones, but the major players. When it comes to Wachowski's third criteria, that their pursuits are influenced by beliefs, when last have you heard Zuckerberg speak?
I'm here to tell you that finding your purpose isn't enough. The challenge for our generation is to create a world where everyone has a sense of purpose.
These founders were and are highly convicted leaders, out to do nothing short of shaping human consciousness, and by extension human existence. While I would argue that capital still remains king for net states, the ideologies that underlie their operational models are the forces that keep us firmly wired in. One would stand to reason that any encroachment into the domain of the world's leading nation states must be an undertaking backed by colossal amounts of zeal, the very sort imbued in Facebook's founding motto, move fast and break things. Big tech are no longer in just the business of carrying out their core tech services, but they are involved in much more. They are in the business of rivaling not just the wealth of nation states, but the functions of nation states. A commonality among all four companies is that the citizen user, or more specifically control over the citizen user's data, is key. Data is the lifeblood that keeps their heart pumping. It is the pixels needed to accomplish what's simultaneously one of the most awe-inspiring and also potentially one of the most dangerous human feats. And that feat is acquiring the most complete portrait of the human psyche that ever existed. Franklin Fourier, in his book World Without Mind, points out that a portrait of a psyche is a powerful thing. It allows companies to predict our behavior and anticipate our wants. With data, it is possible to know where you will be tomorrow within 20 meters. Do you realize that if it is possible to know where you'll be, it is also possible to know what you're thinking? In itself, big tech's quest for what would seem to be near clairvoyant abilities is not nefarious. From as far back as ancient philosophy to modern day psychology, humans occupy themselves with decrypting the human psyche. The problem is big tech's godlike view of the marketplace. Lecturer at the City University of London, Cecilia Rickap, in her book Capitalism, Power and Innovation, believes that leading big tech corporations of the 21st century are intellectual monopolies. They rely on a permanent and expanding monopoly over portions of society's knowledge. Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff explains that one of the main tactics used to feed the monopoly is surveillance capitalism, where big tech unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. And so, it's not just that they can predict an exact, decisive influence on citizen users, but they do so unilaterally. This is the problem, and the ideology that underlies this problem is one that the world is all too familiar with. It is an old colonial problem that is now a neo-colonial problem that is best described as a digital colonial problem. In the past, empires expanded their power through the control of critical assets, from trade routes to precious metals. Today, it is not states but technology empires that dominate the world through the control of critical digital infrastructures, data, and the ownership of computational power, explains lawyer and digital rights activist Renata Avila Pinto. Professor Michael Quett, visiting fellow at Yale's Information Society Project, describes the issue as follows. Colonial conquest typically entails dispossession of valuable resources from the native peoples, and ownership and control of critical infrastructure by colonial powers, which facilitates foreign control. Under digital colonialism, foreign powers are planting infrastructure in the global south engineered for its own needs, enabling economic and cultural domination while imposing privatized forms of governance. Quett, Pinto, Wachowski, Zuboff, Galloway, Rickap, and many other digital rights activists have already started the conversation. Their works widen the scope of post-colonial inquiry, putting into focus big tech, their net states, and the predatory nature of their business models. What's at stake here is agency. Europe and its imperial campaigns once seized agency and dominion over many peoples and cultures they had no right to. They made translations from human to beast, from free human to slave, when they had no right to. A hunger for capital gain and a God complex sure can do things. In this digital age, big tech armed with a similar hunger for capital gain and a God complex has wrested control of our data, and it is not forcible. They made us willing accomplices in our own exploitation. How many of us read the terms of service agreements before we download that free Play Store app, or register for that new Gmail email account, or link WhatsApp to our Sims, or make that purchase on Amazon? These TOS agreements are on average about 6,000 words long. Most people don't, but it is those TOS agreements that big tech uses to safeguard itself from any liabilities surrounding the collection, use, and sale of our data for purposes outside of improving citizen user service. If you want people to ignore you, be detailed. Write it down. Big tech, like the capital it craves, is vampire-like and lives only by sucking more data, and lives the more data it sucks. Make no mistake, the price we pay to play in big tech's net states is high. When we use our favorite apps and services and agree to those TOS agreements, we willingly grant access to our digital footprints, including our most private conversations. Apps like Facebook not only collect citizen user data on their platforms, but also collect data from entirely unrelated activities on our devices. This is how they have mastered the art of the personalized suggestions. And if you find it unsettling that your device and all its contents are fair game for data mining, then it should be doubly off-putting when you consider that our data is peddled from company to company like fresh produce. What do you think Google does with the 3.5 billion queries it receives per day? Market them to companies like Amazon, of course. Even our deleted profiles and content, while inaccessible to us, live on in NetState's databanks. All this, and our government, most governments, are near powerless to curb NetStates and their data mining practices. NetStates exact a similar treatment to nation states as they do citizen users. Take Trinidad for instance. They are up in arms because 60% of the bandwidth flowing through their national internet service provider is monopolized by 3 companies. Their ISP foots the bill to service the pipelines, while big tech handsomely profits without proportionally giving back to the country. And this happens because net states, especially in smaller nation states like Belize, operate with impunity. If even we were to have a grievance about a perceived breach of privacy or other perceived injustices, where would we seek redress when net states conveniently operate outside the jurisdiction of most nation states? Yes, it is true that we have at our fingertips the cutting edge of innovation, but it is also true that we are the innovation. We have been commodified, and with every click, swipe, and keystroke, we maintain big tech's flexible positional superiority. With an infinite supply of citizen user data, used to amass an almost infinite supply of capital and influence, what really, if anything, can we do? If the very nation states that birthed the world's largest net states are struggling to regulate digital colonial practices and safeguard user data, then where does this situate smaller nation states like Belize? On one end, we're empowered by being plugged in, but on the other end, we're disempowered by the very tools and platforms we've so come to love. Should we just throw our arms up in resignation at the resource-heavy, tech-savvy leviathans and do nothing? Or are there pragmatic moves that can be made to establish more fair citizen user rights in the future? And so, a viable way forward for us in Belize is the expansion of our foreign ministry's portfolio to include techplomacy. Denmark was the first country to take this bold step in 2017. Their tech embassy seeks to dismantle the inequity inherent in the relationship between citizen users and net states, prioritizing the concept of reciprocation. They have advisors who work closely with net states to learn about new tech developments and use that information to further national growth. They have policy developers who work closely with net states to learn their methods and use that information to develop policy protections at home for citizen users. They even have personnel tasked with bringing foreign investment home by spotlighting their country's efforts in seeking more equitable citizen user rights. Are you seeing the picture of what a similar mechanism can afford Belize and many other smaller nation states? We would be joining fellow nation states in pressuring big tech and their net states to work more symbiotically rather than parasitically. On a citizen user level, another viable way forward is to continue raising awareness. We need to raise generations that understand what it means to be citizen users, to understand that cyberspace comes with both rights and responsibilities. This way, we will have young people that are more critically inclined to make informed choices online that are to a lesser degree influenced by big tech stealth mechanisms. Also, awareness of big tech colonial practices can help us as a people to safeguard ourselves from similar injustices from our own local tech companies. This is a story about us and our data. This is also a story about big tech and our data. Thank you, fellow citizen user, for your attention.